She made fun of me, saying, "All you have is this field and an old house, while I have made a fortune." My name is Diane. As I turned 50 this year, I spend my days taking care of the house. People frequently comment on how much I resemble my parents, saying things like, "Your eyes are exactly like your mother's." My face is starting to look more and more like my mother's every day. After 25 years of marriage, both of my children have grown up and moved out to live on their own. Kevin, my oldest son, is developing his career at a top New York corporation while pursuing his passion in the IT industry. My younger daughter, Mandy, who works as a nurse, remained in the area. Now, the pictures of their early years seem like faraway recollections. Right now, my spouse and I are the only ones beginning our lives together. We discuss how important it is to value our time together, but life is unpredictable. I was faced with a new difficulty after the kids moved out, taking care of my elderly parents, who had spent their entire lives farming. When they were young, they were robust and healthy, and there were no hospitals in their lives. I can still clearly remember my father working hard next to my mother, who was usually grinning. However, no one can stop time from passing, and as people age, their power steadily diminishes. They were forced to retire at some point. I didn't want to quit, yet my father said with a slight smile. His words tightened a knot in my chest. "It's a pity I can't make vegetables for you anymore," my mother murmured. At that moment, tears naturally streamed down my face. "There's no one to take over," my father said disappointedly. Hearing this, my heart swirled with various emotions, a mixture of anger at my indifferent older sister and guilt towards my parents. My sister, 2 years my senior, had always been a significant influence on me. From her youth, she led a flashy lifestyle, acting thoughtlessly and without responsibility. Each time I witnessed her way of living, I felt irritated and disappointed internally, unable to accept her actions. During her high school years, she barely attended and eventually quit on her own accord, despite our parents' serious discussions. She never listened. As a result, she left home, lived day to day without a stable life, and wandered aimlessly. Then, without any warning, she would appear suddenly and demand financial support from our parents. Each time I saw her live like this, I felt immense frustration and powerlessness. Still, because she was their daughter, our parents couldn't bring themselves to scold her harshly. I felt a certain irritation with my always gentle parents. As they aged and moved away from farming, my sister stopped visiting home altogether. She harshly said, "Your life must be tough now that you stopped farming." Hearing her cold words, I couldn't help but feel indignation. She had no interest in our financially struggling parents. I was truly furious at my sister, who showed no gratitude towards our parents. Despite being my sister, her actions were dreadful. Seeing her attitude made me think that the saying, "blood is thicker than water," is a lie. As caregiving became necessary, I returned to my parents' house and dedicated myself to caregiving daily. The daily tasks were physically and mentally demanding, but remembering the love I received from my parents as a child always powerfully supported me. "I'm sorry for being a burden, Diane," my parents would apologize. All I could manage was to smile back at them. Every time I saw their faces, my chest filled with pain. "This is my way of repaying you. I am who I am today because of you, Dad and Mom." I expressed my deep gratitude. "Thank you," my mother said simply, with tears of gratitude. Seeing her like that, I struggled to hold back my own tears. The doctor had told us, "Your parents won't live much longer." Those shocking words left me feeling as if my whole body had frozen, wrapped in deep sadness. I needed considerable time to accept reality. Even with emotions running high, I reached out to my sister. With trembling hands and nerves, I tightly gripped my cell phone. "I want you to come and see Dad and Mom," I said cautiously, suppressing my shaky voice. No matter how unreasonable her actions, she was still my sister. My family and our blood connection could not be erased. At least in her childhood, she must have received our parents' warm love. I deeply hoped that somewhere she remembered that fact, because it might be the last chance. I told her to come and see our parents. However, her response was cold and heartless, contrary to my expectations. Her words lacked empathy, and her near-betrayal response deeply wounded me. "What? Why? I don't have time for that," my sister replied indifferently. Hearing that, I was stunned and very disappointed. Was she really out of time, or was it just an excuse? Such thoughts crossed my mind. "It's bothersome." She continued to dismiss our parents so casually. I was appalled and overwhelmed with sadness. "I'm working a part-time job. I worked yesterday and today. I think I'll go to the casino." I could only sigh deeply in my heart. From the way she spoke, it seemed she might have gotten involved in gambling. Oh, the same old pattern again, I thought, as my sister's bad habits crossed my mind. I couldn't suppress the mental exhaustion I felt. Is gambling more important than visiting our parents? I can't believe it. I couldn't help but raise my voice. Her thoughtless words made me even sadder. "It's the most important thing for me," she said. Her words shook me deeply. "I can't believe you value gambling over our parents' lives," I screamed inwardly, realizing again just how selfish and incomprehensible my sister's thinking was. My anger reached its peak. I could no longer tolerate such appalling behavior from my awful sister, so I decided to hang up the phone. After that, she never showed her face at our parents' home, nor visited them. Her indifferent attitude also hurt me day by day. Our parents lost their vitality, and their previous energy faded away unexpectedly quickly. My father passed away, and the next day, my mother quietly took her last breath. They died just one day apart, having cared for and supported each other until the end. Their loving presence and the immense sense of loss were precious to me. After I finished crying, I faced the busy days that awaited me. In a reality where even mourning felt luxurious, I couldn't help but give a wry smile. The preparation for the simultaneous funerals of both parents was busier than I had imagined. A cold air flowed through every corner of the house, filled with sadness. During this difficult time, not only did my husband strongly support me, but my children also actively helped. With their cooperation, I managed to get through it, filled with deep gratitude towards my family. Ideally, I should have been discussing the funeral arrangements with my sister, but she was nowhere to be found. Strangely, the house felt darker without her. I managed to contact her, but all I got back was an indifferent reply. The funeral? Sorry, I'm busy. Handle it yourself." And she hung up abruptly. I was simply left in despair by her words. How could she say, "Handle it yourself"? My heart was a tangled mess of various emotions. Even at 52, my sister's irresponsible attitude hadn't changed at all. Time had passed, but the essence of a person doesn't change that easily, I realized painfully. As the funeral proceeded with deep sorrow, I felt both a sense of loss and anger towards my sister. Then, a few days later, my sister, who hadn't shown her face for a long time, finally came to our parents' home. Seeing her, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. Why has she shown up now, after not appearing at the funeral? I wondered, and I couldn't help but smirk. Probably, she had come to discuss the inheritance. Being reminded of my sister's true nature, I felt very disappointed. "It's been a while, Diane. You've aged quite a bit." I inadvertently let out a deep sigh in my heart. "Leave me alone. You've aged just the same. I haven't been chased by child-rearing like you, so I can stay much younger. Maybe people will think I'm your younger sister." Her first words upon our reunion couldn't have been more exasperating. Even with age, my sister's character and essence hadn't changed at all. Boasting about being single, she actually looked significantly older, which was striking. It was a moment that made me realize once again that time affects everyone the same. When she quietly prayed in front of the family portrait for a moment, my heart softened, and I felt as if I was rewarded with something. "What's the point of doing this? The deceased are watching," she said, pulling me back to reality. "Why would you say that?" I wanted to argue vehemently in my heart, but facing her indifference towards our parents only brought taints. I took a deep breath and focused on suppressing my anger. I sat down, determined to get this discussion over with as quickly as possible, wanting to leave this place as soon as possible. "Drive me, Latoon. Begin then. Thank you in advance." I exchanged words. Sitting in front of me was a calm lawyer. Seeing his composed demeanor, I gradually felt more at peace. Thankfully, our parents had carefully prepared a will, which brought some relief to this situation. I felt truly grateful for their foresight. The time to break the seal on the will had come. My heart was swirling with various emotions. "So how much will I get?" my sister asked half-jokingly, ripping open the envelope with vigor. I was dumbfounded by her action. "Calm down a bit," I raised my voice. The atmosphere tensed up further, and the lawyer also started to read the will with a somewhat perplexed look. His words resonated throughout the room. According to the will, my sister received a considerable sum of money, while I inherited our family home and the fields our parents had tirelessly cultivated. This revelation stirred a mix of emotions in me. Upon hearing this, my sister exclaimed, "Really? That's fantastic!" and burst into loud laughter. Her laughter echoed through the quiet room, feeling out of place. "Is this the cash?" "Wow, $300,000 in the bank account. That's amazing. They earned more than I thought," my sister exclaimed in surprise as she stared at the bank book. The greedy gleam in her eyes gave me goosebumps. Indeed, the amount was substantial. Thinking about how our parents had built up such wealth through hard work filled me with pain for my sister, who led an irregular life and never held a stable job. This sum was like a gift from heaven. Watching her exuberant reaction, I grew anxious. I, too, was surprised that our parents had left behind such a sum, knowing their frugal lifestyle. It was a shock. They had poured their lives into farming, showing little interest in other pleasures. So thinking about their dedicated, simple lives filled me with mixed feelings. The contrast between their modest living and the fruit of their labor left me with deep, complex emotions. "And what about Diane?" my sister asked, still laughing incessantly, gauging my reaction. There wasn't a trace of her former self in her face, and the nastiness behind her smile was apparent. Despite knowing the contents of the will, she casually said to me, "So, the house and the field are Diane's share. I'm truly surprised." Laughing loudly at that, anger boiled inside me. Her laughter painfully rang in my ears. Though I repeatedly told myself to stay calm, anger swirled inside me. I understood that being carried away by emotions wouldn't improve the situation, but even my rationality was being tested. "All you have is an old house in this field, while I have made a fortune," she mocked me. "You pathetic thing." "Ha ha," my sister taunted. At that moment, I felt like I was going to pass out. The blood rushed to my head in anger, but I managed to restrain myself and suppress the frustrating feelings. Arguing would solve nothing. I took a deep breath and calmed myself. The house and field I inherited might look modest compared to the large sum my sister received, but I felt deep down that this was not just about the money. My parents had entrusted me with this land and home, our family's history, believing I would cherish it. Determined to protect this precious inheritance, I encouraged myself. I kept repeating affirmations internally to control my emotions. "Stay strong. I understood the depth of our parents' love more than anyone. That love held a value that could not be measured in money, and I truly inherited that well. It's true that the eldest daughter gets special treatment, and since I was especially favored, I can somewhat understand our parents' feelings, my sister remarked. I smirked inwardly at her words. After finishing her laugh, she casually swung the bank book in front of me, bringing back a fleeting sadness of her childhood self. "Well then, I'll be taking this with me," my sister cheerfully declared. "I want to avoid any trouble over how the inheritance is split later," she continued, her calm demeanor slightly betrayed by her urgency. The lawyer had already prepared the necessary documents, and my sister signed them before leaving. As I watched her back, my heart was filled with tumultuous emotions. Once my sister was out of sight, I shouted, "Never set foot in this house again." My own actions felt like a scene from a farcical comedy. Ironically, I resolved to erase her presence from my memory. Yet, telling myself this, the question of whether I could truly forget a sister with whom I shared blood continued to smolder in the depths of my heart. This was probably our final farewell. Though I told myself this, the thought brought a feeling of constriction in my chest, a sense of loneliness. Still, I reassured myself that cutting off such a toxic relationship was for the best. Standing before the land inherited from our parents, there were moments when I felt at a loss about how to proceed. Maybe I'll just expand the vegetable garden a bit, I thought, encouraging myself while considering what I could do. This field was not just any field. It was a precious legacy filled with my parents' years of effort and love. I began to feel that there was meaning in cultivating something and making use of its value. When I shared these thoughts with my husband, he immediately agreed. Filled with gratitude for him, I again felt supported when he said, "This is the field your parents cherished. I'll support you." His encouragement helped me resolve to move forward without hesitation. I started learning how to care for the long-neglected field from a farmer who was a friend of my father, and began the work while confused by this new challenge. I felt the significance of making even small advances. In addition to the crops my father had previously grown, I also tried new types of vegetables. The days of farming continued with many attempts and failures. I keenly felt the harshness of farming throughout this process. I would often murmur, "Farming is really tough," while sighing. Certainly, I had some experience growing vegetables at home, but this challenge was on an entirely different level. Every day, I was reminded of my own limitations, the vastness of the fields, and the difficulty of growing crops for commercial purposes, rather than for personal consumption. Understanding the rigors of true farming deepened my respect and gratitude for my late parents. Day by day, revitalizing the parched land proved to be a tougher task than anticipated. But my daily diligent efforts gradually began to yield results. Finding the right crops for the soil was not straightforward and involved much difficulty. After numerous failures, I finally identified crops that suited the conditions. I stayed vigilant through the seasonal changes and fought against insects and birds. Battling with nature was nearly heartbreaking at times. It wasn't just about growing crops. I constantly had to think of ways to protect them and find appropriate solutions to unexpected problems. Despite many setbacks and failures, I persisted tirelessly. When my luxurious living sister condescendingly remarked over the phone, "You're doing well. I, being rich, could never do that," and insulted me, anger welled up inside me, unsettling my heart once again. I don't know how she found out I was farming, but she contacted me. Her attitude was as infuriating as ever, and every word irritated me. I didn't even have the energy to argue with her. I just kept telling myself to forget her. I wasn't sure if I could truly forget her, and the uncertainty troubled me. Strangely, my anger towards her fueled my energy, allowing me to immerse myself in farming. A significant amount of money was needed to buy used agricultural machinery, but I considered it a necessary investment and decided to use my savings to make the purchase. "I'm investing in the future," I repeatedly told myself. "It's your money. You saved it, so there's no problem." My husband assured me, his generosity filling me with deep gratitude. In fact, it was money I had diligently saved from the allowance he gave me. Technically, it was his money, and thinking about that made me feel somewhat guilty. Yet he supported me without any worries, and his attitude moved me to tears. My gratitude for him was renewed, and I found myself drawn to him all over again. "I really chose a good person," I quietly murmured to myself. The children also actively researched agriculture on the internet and shared their knowledge with me. I was truly grateful for my family's actions. The local farmers, whom my father had known for years, were also incredibly kind and spared no effort in helping me. Supported by the warm help of these people around me, I felt heartfelt gratitude every day. If it weren't for my irritating sister, I could fully dedicate myself to farming. I resolved to erase her from my consciousness and took a firm step forward in my new endeavor. What began as a mere hobby in agriculture had, before I realized it, become a major part of my life. I seriously delved into it. As time passed, I truly felt I am indeed my parents' daughter and explored this path deeply. I felt a slight pride and satisfaction in this realization. And finally, I accomplished it. Long-term efforts bore fruit, and a surge of emotion welled up inside me. I was moved and overwhelmed by the first harvest from this field. The sensation made my eyes warm with emotion, and though the yield was small compared to the vegetables my parents once grew, the fact that I had nurtured these results myself gave me a profound sense of fulfillment. That was enough. Even if the results were not grand, I repeatedly reassured myself of the significance of what I had achieved and felt the impact of having taken a significant step forward. "Well, you wouldn't think it's your first time. You're quite good at this," said an old man who had been farming for years, addressing me. His warm words made my heart feel cozy. "No, I've gotten old myself," I thought with a self-deprecating smile. Yet, seeing his aged appearance reminded me somewhat of my father, and I was deeply moved. A compliment from someone who loved farming as my father did felt like encouragement from my father himself. I felt nostalgia mixed with loneliness. "How about revising your fertilizer and watering? Maybe try that fertilizer your dad used to use," the experienced old man suggested. Listening to his advice, I realized there was still so much to learn. Based on this valuable information, I resolved to strive to come close to the rich flavors of the vegetables my parents once produced. My love for my parents was translating into my efforts in farming. My efforts were gradually bearing fruit, and the field was slowly transforming. Each time I saw the crops grow, even just a little, I felt great joy within. What started as work in just a corner of the field had eventually covered all the plots. The vast change surprised even me. Day by day, as I experimented with various crops, I repeated failures and successes. Each day was filled with new discoveries and continuous learning. Gradually, my farming skills improved, and the quality of the vegetables I could produce significantly increased. Over the years, the fruits of my labor began to show. "It's amazing, another bountiful year," I said, as words of gratitude from my buyers made my heart leap. The joy of meeting their expectations and the fulfillment of being recognized filled me even more. "We look forward to more," they said. Hope and a sense of responsibility for the future blossomed within me. "Thank you. I look forward to continuing our partnership," I said, filled with gratitude. "The vegetables I grow in my field have reached a level where they can be sold. The land my parents cherished now supports my livelihood. We have also found merchants to trade with. Though gradual, this business is beginning to take shape. One day there was a request to feature me in a special project titled, How a Housewife Succeeded in Starting Farming. I was a bit bewildered by the sudden proposal, but learning that the vegetables I grow have become popular locally added to my surprise. However, this achievement is not mine alone. It exists because of the support and advice of many people. I have been able to continue farming, especially with the wisdom my father left behind. My father's teachings still live in my heart, and I hold a deep sense of gratitude. Yet I am not satisfied with my achievements. I feel the importance of evolving and aiming higher, even if slowly. I spend my days striving, but I am still far from creating the ultimate flavor my father achieved. My pursuit of that ideal seems endless. I embrace a strong determination to strive even harder. Then, suddenly, a voice from a forgotten past echoed in my head. What is this? I shuddered involuntarily. A cold fear ran through me as I was heading to the field. A voice I should not have remembered called out from behind. There was my sister, whom I had not seen in a long time. Sis, how many years has it been since our last meeting? I could feel the length of time, though I could recognize her from the faint traces of her former self. The person before me had changed significantly. Her appearance had aged remarkably, and she looked so different that it was as if she was someone else entirely. Beyond merely getting older, you've aged quite a bit. I was astonished by my own comment that slipped out. Leave me alone. It has nothing to do with you, she responded, her unchanged reaction bringing a complexity of feelings within me. Noticing my gaze, she suddenly frowned and yelled. Seeing her angry face brought back memories, and I even felt a bit nostalgic. However, that expression no longer scared me. If anything, the scene was almost comical, and I had to struggle to hold back laughter. What's with the sudden visit? I never thought we'd meet again, I said, trying to remain calm, but I was internally shaken. Why had my sister, who hadn't visited our family home for many years, suddenly appeared here? What is this? She asked loudly, pointing to the house behind me. I couldn't hide my confusion. What do you mean? This is the house our parents lived in, I said, stating the obvious. Yet somehow my heart was disturbed. That's not what I mean. It wasn't this beautiful before. It used to be much older, she said. Ah, I see. I felt a little relieved by her words. I had considered selling our family home, but after renovating it, it had been transformed beyond recognition. It was the fruit of my hard work. I renovated it a while ago, I answered, but I was scared of her next reaction. You had the money for renovations? She asked. I felt a bit annoyed by her question, but responded calmly. It was money I earned from farming. She responded as usual. How can you make so much money from farming? I wish she would ask more gently, not in a shouting voice. I'm not hard of hearing yet. I sighed deeply inside. I grew vegetables on the field we inherited from our parents. They were well received in the market, and it has become a viable business, I explained. Still, her reaction was chilly, and it felt like she couldn't quite grasp it. What do you mean? Her response forced me to sigh deeply again. Despite my years of hard work finally beginning to pay off, she seemed unable to comprehend the difficulty of my efforts. When my sister arrived, I had a bad feeling that something unpleasant might happen, and that premonition was perfectly accurate. She said something shocking. So, that's it. There must have been some secret to the field our parents left. Her words shocked me. Why can she only see things that way? At that moment, my mind was filled with dismay and disappointment, and I lost my voice. Why can you only think like that? I barely managed to say. There's no way you could succeed in farming otherwise, I argued from the bottom of my heart. I worked hard. Don't you understand? I replied, struggling to control my emotions. But my sister continued, "There definitely must be some secret to that land." I was astounded by her words. Her delusions had gone beyond my understanding. How can you say such things without even asking how much effort I put in? And what secret? Where is this magic you speak of? I countered. Her lack of appreciation for my efforts left me feeling not just dismayed, but also a bit heartbroken. You knew about this secret and kept silent. I was flabbergasted by her accusation. Really, I have no idea what you're talking about, I replied with exhaustion. I've done my research. If property turns out to be more valuable later, the division of the estate can be revisited. So, I argue that we should redo the division of the farmland, and I will take over the field. Her claimed ignorance infuriated me. That's ridiculous, I snapped. What do you mean? Her comments were so childish that I struggled to comprehend. It's ridiculous. All you talk about is money. Money. Can't you say something sensible for once? Overwhelmed by emotions, harsh words slipped out of my mouth. There's no secret to the field, I asserted strongly. Taking a deep breath, I tried to calm myself, but she retorted, "That's a lie." Her simplistic response ignited my anger. Why would I need to lie? If you don't believe it, go ask an expert, I suggested, and she seemed a bit shaken by my firm statement. Seeing her unsettled made me feel somewhat satisfied that she was feeling unsure. However, watching her expression darken, a sense of guilt began to grow inside me. But look, the house has been remodeled, right? And the farming is successful, right? Seeing her anxious behavior, a part of me felt sympathetic. Farming isn't always profitable. It's the result of support from people around us, not just the field, I explained, but it seemed hard for her to understand. Still, you must be making a profit. Her attitude only made me feel tired. That's it. There's nothing more to discuss, I blurted out, my true feelings coming through. I was utterly fed up with her fundamental misunderstanding. I began to think about how to overcome this difficult situation. Fine, whatever I say won't get through to you. I desperately wanted to resolve the situation quickly. You can have half the field if you want, I impulsively suggested, surprising myself.
Later, she exclaimed triumphantly, raising her fists in the air. Watching her, my feelings were a mix of complexity. On one hand, a part of me felt calm. I had a bit of confidence that the best way for her to understand was to experience it herself. I thought, considering she had never seriously committed to anything before, I could somewhat predict the outcome. Yet, I was a bit worried about her potential failure. "Won't you help me?" she asked. It was an unexpectedly quick conclusion. Her actions, unsurprisingly, made me sigh again. Only a month after starting farming, my sister was already asking for help. The speed of this development shocked me. With a helpless voice, she pleaded, "Help me." But I responded coolly, "What do you need help with?" "I don't know what to do about farming." Her bewildered voice almost made me want to hold my head in my hands. Looking over the field, I was stunned by the neglect. It was a complete mess. Seeing the land that my parents had lovingly tended now in such a state filled me with pain. What had my sister been doing for a month? My disappointment exceeded my surprise. Her actions were so far from common sense that I couldn't understand what she had expected. "This is a magic field, right?" she asked, as if she believed that just sowing seeds would solve everything without proper care. Her childish statement frustrated me beyond words. Her ignorance of the reality of farming nearly brought me to tears. If growing crops was so easy, everyone would be doing it. How could I explain such a clear fact in a way she would understand? I was also puzzled with irony. I responded, It takes a little more time. Maybe in a few years, you might see some profit." At my cold reply, she nearly started crying and pleaded, "I don't know what to do." I continued to admonish her. "This isn't the time for such talk." But she suddenly raised her voice. Surprised by her sudden change, I was taken aback when she revealed, "Actually, I came because I'm covered in debts." I asked again, incredulous. "Yes, I'm covered in debts," she confessed, and I was speechless with astonishment. "Why would you do that? You received $300,000 from the inheritance, didn't you?" My heart was a whirl of confusion and disappointment. "That money is gone. I used it all on gambling, and there's nothing left," my sister quietly explained. My heart turned cold. "Really? You can't be serious." I was speechless, overwhelmed with anger and despair. I didn't want to work, so I thought I'd make a big turnaround by borrowing money. That all failed. Then I heard you were succeeding in farming, so I thought I'd try it too. But why is it so hard? It doesn't make any money at all. Exhausted by her story, all I could do was sigh deeply. I don't know what to tell you. I was dumbfounded by her lack of understanding. As I sighed deeply in the depths of my heart, I felt the emptiness of this conversation. The realization that my sister had squandered the precious inheritance from our parents in just a few years filled me with deep indignation and disappointment. The guilt toward our parents for her reckless actions tightened around my heart. Thinking you can easily make a profit from farming. How naive can you be? I was amazed at my own disgust. This is no joke, I shouted internally, feeling at my limit, unable to contain my anger. My voice grew increasingly stern. "Please, Diane, I'm begging you, help me," my sister pleaded in a desperate tone. Her words shook me, but I took a deep breath to maintain my composure. "I'm sorry, I can't help you," I stated clearly, surprised by my own decisiveness yet confident in my choice. We were family, but I no longer felt a desire to help her. All the emotions I had held back suddenly surged forward. If my sister had shown any willingness to resolve things herself, perhaps I would have reacted differently. I might have considered it more if I had any hope that she would, but ultimately, she always sought help from others, and never tried to stand on her own. I felt a profound disappointment with this reality. Seeing no initiative from her to change, I realized I could no longer have any expectations. Her consistently self-centered behavior deepened my despair. "Please, can you lend me just a little money?" she implored desperately. As I decided to walk away from the field, leaving my sister behind, my heart was a turmoil of emotions. I did not want to know what would become of her after this. I wanted nothing more to do with her. Still, when I heard rumors that she was being chased by debt collectors, part of me felt a slight pain, but without further details, I ultimately had to accept that her life was her own. Resolving to step back from my sister's life, I took over the field again. As I shouldered all the responsibilities, farming on this land smoothly unfolded. I was ready to take new steps. I vowed to carve a new future in the field my parents had left behind. While massaging my shoulders during a break, my husband came over and massaged them for me. His kindness, on his days off, helping with the farming warmed my heart. I remembered his words from a while back. It would be nice to farm together after I retire. Those words resonated, and tears naturally welled up. I was filled with gratitude. A new chapter of life with my husband was about to begin. Our children were also starting to take an interest in farming, and they might join us. I felt the family bonds deepening day by day. This house and field are a treasure filled with my parents' love. I hope they are pleased knowing I am continuing to protect what they cherish. Looking up at the sky, I could see my parents' smiling faces. Mom, Dad, I'll take good care of this field. Watch me. I'll grow vegetables as delicious as those you made.